Hey there, folks. Welcome to another edition of Stranger in a Southern Land. I, of course, am your host, Jake Manning. Today in the program, I speak with Alan from Saint Paul Mountain Vineyard. Alan, who is a very well-educated individual when it comes to farming and wine, and also very generous person. He was very generous when he was dishing out free samples of his wine, and maybe a little too generous. I am trying not to drink as much these days, but Alan is making it very difficult for me, and that's okay. My girlfriend is very happy by the amount of wine that I brought home. So anyways, also thank you to Candy. She would help line this whole thing up, and she told me Alan would be fantastic, and he was. I mean, he really was. He's a very well-educated individual, and some of the stuff he says may go over your head. But this is what I recommend that you do. I recommend that you get in a car, drive up to Hendersonville, North Carolina, go to Saint Paul Mountain Vineyard, tell them that Jake Manning sent you there, and let Alan give you an education of a lifetime on wine and farming. Anyways, let me educate you on what dates I've got coming up. This Wednesday, September 2nd, I will be performing at the Tree Monstrous Comedy Show. And if you listen to episode 27 with Nick Alexander, you'll understand how cool this show is and how cool it's going to be. So make sure you come out for that. Nick Alexander is doing great things for this comedy scene here in Charlotte. So make sure you show up to Tremont Music Hall, Tree Monstrous Comedy Show, September 2nd, this Wednesday. And then this weekend, I will be wrestling for PWX, September 4th, September 5th, and September 6th. I think so. I'm not for sure. Just check the website. They probably know better than I do what I'm doing on it. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be there all 3 days. I know at least one day, but it might be all three. Just check their website or check my social media, which is, if you want to follow me on Twitter, at ManScoutManning. If you want to follow me on Instagram, at ManScoutManning. If you have a question about the podcast, make sure you email me at jake@sslshow.com. Or if you want to book me for an upcoming wrestling event, make sure you email me at manscoutmanning@yahoo.com. Anyways, let's jump into this wonderful conversation that I have with Alan from Saint Paul Mountain Vineyard, here on Stranger in a Southern Land. Well, I'm sitting here with Alan from Saint Paul Mountain Vineyard. Alan, this is a wonderful facility that we can see in the background right now. Thank you for having me today.
We really appreciate you coming out and hope you enjoy visiting with us. We grew up here, been here for 9 generations. We're not vampires, but our family's been here for 9 generations, farming this very piece of soil. Our family moved here from Virginia in the 1650s.
Okay.
And we've been here for quite a while. And I really love farming. It's not a natural occurrence, other than I grew up on a farm.
Yeah, I did as well. I grew up in a small town Iowa farm as well, so I know that background.
Well, I started out as a chemistry biology major. I'm a senior portfolio manager, but I don't play golf and I don't hunt and fish, but I love farming. And getting in these tractors and getting in the vineyard is just what keeps me sane.
Yeah. It sounds a lot like my father, and you do have a striking resemblance to my father, so it's kind of eerie that you're talking to me like that, because I do come from a family farm as well. Yeah. But, what it is about farming that you like about it?
Well, farming is more of a permanent. I've seen people come here and heard from my mom and dad and others about how people came here with nothing, had no money whatsoever. And we see that with the Barnwell family, the Freeman family, that are relatives of ours that came here really with nothing back right after the Great Depression and even during the Great Depression, and really created a lot of wealth, not just money, but created a lot of job and a lot of opportunity for this community. Instead of having houses dotted everywhere and trailer parks, no offense to anyone, but just we like to see sustainable farming. Apples. A lot of people don't realize this area is so unique here. This is the second oldest mountain range in the world, the Appalachian Mountains. We've got more diversity of geological formations than anywhere in the world. We're currently working on an American viticulture area, which is a federal designation, where it takes Henderson County because of our altitude. We're 2,300 feet here. We farm at 3,000 and 3,500 feet, really further south. There's just so much uniqueness here to this area. I just want to try and preserve as much as I can. That's why I still work, why I farm, and we do things that will be here 40, 50 years before they have to be replanted. Things that people can enjoy, agritourism. You can taste wine in a grocery store, but if you do it right, you do it an artesian way, or you do it in the artisan way. The artisan way.
I guess
that's
that's the hipster term, I guess.
Yeah. But if you do it the real way and you take pride in what you do, just got back from France, went to Normandy to study hard cider.
Oh, really?
Took a gentleman with me from NC State, and we studied hard cider. Then we went to Burgundy, which is very similar to this region. Late frost, a lot of rainfall, like an overcast day like today. So we really try and do our homework. Before we planted, we did a lot of work with Cornell University. A gentleman, Dr. Anderson, Robert Anderson, actually lives here in Hendersonville. And we adopted the Geneva double curtain. So we kind of look like the hippie vineyard, if you look. The vines are growing, but what that does, it helps us control the vigor. On days like today, we've got a 5 or 6 foot solar panel coming off of each of the clusters of grapes. We try and learn from a lot of folks. That's why we work with the universities. Our winemakers are normally they're always full-time. But they're people that have experience. I tell people I've been driving a car for 40, 45 years. I love Formula One racing, but I'll never be a Formula One race car driver. I won't be a winemaker. I know how to taste wine. I know what to expect, but I know to hire people that really know what they're doing. I love the farming. I know that aspect of it. We grow the best fruit that we possibly can, and according to the winemakers we've had, they've been Cal Polytech, UC Davis graduates from the West Coast with a lot of experience, tell us that we have some of the most unique fruit that we produce here because of the altitude. We get the warmth in the daytime, but when you're up at 3,000 feet, 2,500, much less 3,500, you'll get those cool nights. You keep your acids. That's where your flavors come from. So this is just a very unique area. So that's what really drives me, is to take this area, work on that American viticulture area, which will be called the Eastern Continental Divide, because that's what we're on. We have more diversity of plant life than anywhere in the world, even the rainforest. So this is a unique area that's very close to me that I want to be in farming after I'm gone for several generations. And we do a lot of planting. We see farms come and go, and unfortunately people don't plan. But from my background on the financial side, I'm putting that in place.
Well, through those 9 generations, has this always been a fruit farm? Was it anything else?
This is always. People that moved here back in those days, before the orchards came in the 20s and 30s, they farmed to survive, to live off of the land. So this land's been farmed. You'd have a cow. You'd maybe plow with a horse. You'd grow most of the food. You'd take your livestock. You would eat your livestock and things of that nature. So it was really self-sustaining. When I grew up with my grandfather, I lived with him right across the road till I was 6 years old, and no indoor plumbing, had electricity, heated with a wood stove. So even though I get to go to New York and do all these things that are maybe a little uppity, I feel very, very well-rounded because I've seen how people survive at a basic form, and they're not poor. It's just they were able to get along with minimal input from the town.
Yeah, when farming was just merely to sustain yourself and then sell off to get the stuff that you needed.
Exactly. So I take pride in that. I take pride in the heritage of the folks here and have a lot of respect for the farmers. Because you take someone coming here and creating, really millions of dollars of wealth from nothing. And the one lady, Mrs. Freeman, she looped rugs, took them to what we call the curb market here in town. My mom says that she bought a lot of property by making those rugs. Just people, creative, industrious people that were survivors and achievers.
Well, when did that change happen? Went from just surviving to being creative people. What about time and on the timeline of this place?
I would say the 20s and 30s were pretty tough. The 40s were probably beginning to change after World War II. 50s and 60s and 70s were really very prosperous for the apple farmers. A lot of packing houses. Then you had people come in that were producer or processors, where people kind of maybe got a little bit off balance. Instead of selling their fruit or selling a finished product or a retail product, they got into processing. Then you went through a down cycle in the 80s and 90s, and now you're getting back into agritourism. People want to see real things in a real way. That's what we have in mind here. We also have a farm we just purchased, and we plan on putting that back as close as we can to the way it was in the 50s and 60s with products that were made. Give you an example, apple jelly. Go to the store and you buy apple jelly. Well, when I grew up, there was 5 or 6 different types of apple jelly. June apple, Wolf River, Cortland. You had all kind of different apples, just like wines. You have different wines. You just don't have wine. You have Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Riesling. And the same with apple pies, even apple sauce. So we're trying to do a lot of things that were done in the past before they get gone. Miss Barnwell over at the edge of the road here, she just turned, I think, 93. And she still comes to the packing house and the curb market every day. But she has some things that'll be lost when that generation's gone. Canning, making applesauce, learning what varieties of apples to make applesauce out of. The same with the grapes. That's when we go to Europe. You know, some of those places, we stayed at a place called Chateauneuf, which is Newcastle, basically. That was 12th century, and it was just so amazing to me. And we're not talking about Paris or Lyon. We're talking about the farms out there, where for centuries these farms have not changed. They haven't changed hands. Families own them. They have some restrictions on what you can do and grow, which may be a little over restrictive, but they do respect the farming. And you get in that Normandy area. I know people think of World War II, but that's the capital of cider in Normandy. And they really respect the farming and they respect tradition. That's something I feel that we need here a little bit more of. So, understanding these people, what they accomplished, I think is part of it. How much work it took to get it to this stage. And then you put everybody in college and then they go away.
I'm guilty of that. I wish my father would come back and probably have the same passion that you have about farming. Well, what was it that gave you that passion?
Well, I'll tell you, when I was probably a senior in high school, I worked for a couple of farmers during that period of time, 9th, 10th, 11th grade. When I was a senior, I just thought, I don't want to be cooped up in an office all day long or a laboratory. And I thought someday, and that someday took quite a while to get here, but I've had a lot of independence in my job and really feel fortunate to have had the career I've had, but I'm trying to put it back into farming. My son's a physician. My daughter's a graduate from NC State. I want them to have an opportunity to choose how stressful or unstressful, what they can do, where they have an option to work together with the family to produce something that what you put into it does have an effect on what you get out.
Yeah,
you can have a different quality of life.
Yeah, my dad, like the big thing with him why he got into farming, especially after his father was a farmer, was the independence of it. Yep. And you clock your own hours, decide when you're going to do this, when you're going to do that. It's the independence of it.
Well, I find out it's not work. A lot of people think I'm crazy working a full-time job. I have Bloomberg radio in my tractor so I can keep up with the markets. But there's nothing better than coming out here at midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning to do spray when everything's calm. And the moon's out, the stars are out, and it's just peaceful. I mean, it just puts you back with things that you can't buy. You can't put a price on things like that.
And it's yours. You look out. This is yours.
Well, I'm a caretaker for this lifetime, and then it goes to someone else that we hope has that same passion, because we do have a passion. It's not about the money. We're doing very well, and we feel very fortunate of that. But it's like we tell people, we're not Chateau Ward. We're Saint Paul Mountain Vineyards. We want people to come and learn about viticulture, about growing grapes, about tasting wines, that it's not just something for the sophisticated. We teach people how to enjoy wine and how to taste wine, not how to be pompous.
Be snooty.
Yeah, well, and there's a gentleman by the name of Oz Clark, if anybody wants to look up. He's BBC. He does a program. I don't know if you've ever seen the program Top Gear, where they test drive the cars. James May's on that program with him, and he travels the world, looking at grapes from really ritzy places, really chateau places that are, have wine that goes back to the day of Napoleon. And then James May kind of brings him into reality. Well, what does this mean to me? How does this help me taste wine better? So it's an excellent series, just a way to learn about wine. We're always seeking ways to learn about wine. The history, not to worship it, but just learn about wine. And if it wasn't for the Romans or the Italians, however you want to put it, when they were taking over the empire, we wouldn't have grapes planted. They didn't have a way to ship them back to these areas. And the Roman soldiers, they go through these port towns. They had to have something that they wouldn't get dysentery. So we go back that far. We go back, probably 13,000 years with the history of wine. And a lot of wine was meant for enjoyment, not to get drunk off of, but to enjoy for parties. It was thought to have some qualities of the gods, and just people enjoy themselves when they have a nice glass of wine. And we come out here on this patio. So long story short, I love to see people enjoy themselves. When they come out here, I don't say, hey, I'm the owner, I'm Alan Ward, I've done all this. I just tell them I'm the farmer and I pay the bills, and that's basically it. So we love to see people enjoy and learn about wine and feel comfortable with it.
Yeah. Well, when did you feel comfortable with it? Where did your history and your education in wine start?
I guess my education started in college by drinking things that I would call give me the shivers, because it was just alcohol and whatever.
Yeah.
It wasn't well made.
Well, that's what college is for, is to just drink whatever's put in front of you.
House, yeah. So, over the years, I would go to a restaurant, especially when I started working in the financial services industry, and, would go out and say, gosh, this is totally different. The reds, the whites, what you eat with, and was a little intimidated by it, but, have a little bit of self-confidence and just started reading. Started studying about wine years and years and years ago. And when you'd have somebody courting you to sell your product, I'd always take the opportunity to order the expensive bottle of wine because they were buying. And just really trying to disseminate what is really quality and what's different here and what's fluff. They make bad wine in North Carolina, but I'll tell you what, they make terrible and bad wine in France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, all over. So it's really like anything else. It's like food. If you've got a good product and you've got a great chef or a winemaker, we make some world-class wines here. We've won an international award. We're very careful in what contest we enter. We try and enter things that are meaningful, things that have, we don't enter them to say, hey, look here, we've got these medals. We enter them to see how we're doing, how we are, not how we stack up against the world. But our goal here each year is to try and produce wines that are world-class, world quality, and just keep striving and striving and striving to do better each day and each year.
Well, when you took an interest in wine, where were you at in your life? Like you said, you were in college, but what were you doing?
I was working in the financial services industry.
Okay.
And, you'd go to dinner and a lot of meetings, and you'd have these big dinners where they would have what I call grocery store wine. You could say, you're sitting too hot.
So, it was just really, it was a hobby, something to talk about at dinner. It wasn't anything that you're like, this is my passion. This is what I want to dedicate my life to.
No, and then when we saw Biltmore, what they were doing at Biltmore, I worked over at Biltmore as a volunteer on the weekends and some of the weekdays after work. Learned from some of those guys. I had a winemaker from France, and had some folks that knew some about farming and did a good job. But I learned that they don't grow everything that they make. We try and grow everything, or we do grow everything that we actually put forth to folks, and that they didn't believe we could grow Riesling. And I'll tell you this quick story.
No, please.
I was at a grape growers convention in North Carolina. I'm not going to name the winery, but a guy said, in North Carolina, we have to sell a $7 bottle of wine for $14, so we work on the marketing. And I'm a fairly assertive guy, and I don't back down from a challenge. And I took that as like, well, why don't we focus on really growing a high-quality fruit and having people that know what they're doing make the wine, instead of it being just like in investing, instead of it being a sham, it be something of quality.
Put something out there, but then dress it up so we can, overprice it.
So what we did is we spent our time and money not on an elaborate building, but on studying and looking at what people did in upstate New York with Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Grüner Veltliner, what they were growing, what the possibilities in latitude, longitude, temperatures, rainfall in other parts of Europe. Then we found out that we have some darn unique areas here. Like I told you before, they talk about minerality. We have more diversity of minerals and geological formations than anywhere in the world. This is very rocky soil, so we have a lot of the nutrients that we need here. So we don't, not that we're France, but we don't have anything to hang our head about in western North Carolina in this region. We've got the temperatures, we've got the rainfall, we don't irrigate. We don't irrigate, and we do very little processing on our fruit, meaning we use very little spray materials that are systemic or that get into the plant. We're striving to one day be biodynamic, meaning that we try and plant things. We're working with a gentleman in Avery County where we don't have the big kill strips. You can plant white clover, which is a legume which puts nitrogen in the soil. So we're trying to do things, and it's not just to be cute or to advertise, but when you don't overprocess your fruit, you have a better quality of wine. You don't have things that affect the fermentation. So people don't stop to think with some of the fungicides, some of the sprays that are systemic, just like you taking an antibiotic, they get in your circulatory system of the plant, it affects the fermentation. I mean, it can kill the yeast. There's just a lot of little things, like we use real cork. We don't use synthetic cork. We use French oak, not because we're uppity, but we just are trying to do the things, the nickel, dime, dollar things that add up to make a great wine. We take our time. Did a class with UC Davis where they fermented Riesling, and when Riesling's fermented too quickly, it gets very hot, and if you've had an organic chemistry class, when heat's induced, you can get some strange things. One of the things we found off the head gas we pulled off was diesel. So you get some wines that have some butyl or diesel kind of taste. It's where they're mass produced. We've got to have mass production to get things in the grocery store. Everything can't be artisan, but it's like eating at a good restaurant. When I go to New York, I don't eat at Ruth Chris. Nothing against Ruth Chris, but I'll find this little Italian restaurant that I couldn't tell you the name of, and with my thick Southern accent, I just point on the menu, and with their Italian accent and little English, it's just a great place to eat. It's nice, quiet, it's small, but it's just. It's real, and that's what we try and do here. We try and be real. We try our hardest to grow the best fruit we possibly can. We're patient. We don't buy grapes from other folks, so we can let them hang on the vine. So we do all those little things to hopefully produce the best wine we possibly can for the folks that we feel honored when they come. We want them to have something. We want them to get their money's worth. We want them to really enjoy something that we're extremely proud of.
So it's about doing your homework. You realized you knew you could raise a good product here. You did your homework. You were smart enough to realize that good fruit could be produced here, and it could all be done here on location. You don't have to outsource it. You could do it all right here. And I'm sure there was a lot of trial and error with that. I mean, obviously you do your homework, but when you were helping out at Biltmore, and then you decided to come over here and do it over here. What was that process? How did you start that ball rolling?
Well, what we did is we worked with a gentleman from Virginia Tech who was very, very helpful. We probably drove him crazy because they have a good viticulture program. The Gold Leaf Fund was really what got great production going, which we didn't participate in. I tell people the only grant I got was a Ulysses S. Grant $50 bill I had in the back of my pocket.
But were there people getting grants?
There were people getting grants from the Gold Leaf Foundation, and that kind of got the middle part of the state where tobacco was raised, and then in Virginia, big tobacco country. That was what kind of spurred the sudden growth of viticulture and wineries going up 81 to Washington, D.C.
I was going to say, because they've kind of exploded out of nowhere.
They have, and the same in the East Coast, but what people didn't learn from what we saw was this takes time, just like apples. You just don't plant it and it pops up and you start making money. So you have to put a lot of thought into it. You have to do a lot of research. Rootstock. These are clones. They're not hybrids. They're clones from French vines. The rootstock is American because the European rootstock would die here in our soils. So we had to do a lot of homework. We worked with UC Davis, Cal Polytech, where our winemakers came from. We also worked with Virginia Tech on the East Coast and Cornell University, NC State, and Surrey Community College, believe it or not, is a very, very great source of viticulture science and enology, which is winemaking. So it's not something you can just pop in the ground and go. And it means you really, before you spend, probably on average without equipment, but just the cost of putting a vineyard in per acre is probably around $12,000 to $14,000 an acre now, plus the equipment you need to buy. If you'll notice the little Italian tractors that we have, my head kind of hits the top in some.
Why Italian?
Well, they're made to go in vineyards. This thing actually articulates where the cab meets the cowling of the engine. It rotates. So if you're going up a steep slope, some of the slopes we farm are 32% slopes. Quick story, kind of scary. First tractor I had was a very large farm tractor, big cab. Wouldn't fit through the vineyard once the vines started growing. And where I really learned my lesson is coming down one of those steep slopes and tap the brakes, and we just sped up. So if I hadn't had the front forks on, I'd probably be missing about half the vineyard up there. But we decided that we had to spend a little bit of money and do some research and buy some equipment that was made for viticulture and made for steep slope farming. So the Antonio Carrera, I don't own stock in them or promote them. The Antonio Carrera, if I was a young guy at a setting somewhere trying to impress some women, I'd say I have 3 red Antonio Carreras, and they'd think we had sports cars, but they're tractors. Really neat tractors. This one you can actually reverse the steering wheel and the seat and go backwards. I mean, it's just a neat little tractor, very multi-purpose. The other one looks like a fighter jet can't see from here, but it's very narrow. It really is made to go through these vines because you have about maybe 3-4 feet at the most.
Yeah, you don't have a whole lot of wiggle room.
Yeah, so you have to have equipment that's made for the viticulture, or you'll tear your vines up or have to plant them way far apart.
Yeah, because you got to have the right tools for the job.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what you're trying to do here is produce the best quality product you possibly can.
We are. And again, we don't take anything for granted. Awards, when clients give us compliments, it makes me nervous. It says, what's next? We have to keep up. But it's a good feeling for people to compliment you, but it's also a challenge that you also can't sit on your laurels. You can't look back. You have to keep going forward. And I love that challenge. I love the farming. We love to see people. I love wine. I mean, wine's made to go with a meal. And we have some dessert wines that you have after. But, we just really love to see people enjoy the wine and to learn about it, especially people that start out maybe they just like sweet wines, and you kind of teach them a little bit and how to taste that wine, and wine's made to go with food, and get them some cheese and see how it kind of cuts through, or a piece of steak, a little piece of meat to cut through those oils. What wine was all about, enjoying that flavor. And, you can only taste 4 things with your mouth: bitterness, sweetness, acidity, and salt. I think they have the other thing called umami, which is metallic, but I'm not a billy goat. I don't eat tin cans, so that doesn't help me. But your nasal cavity, where your tongue kind of ends and your nasal cavity begins, that's where you really get the taste of the wine. And people don't understand. So just glugging that stuff back, that we teach people how to swirl their wine, teach people about aerating their wine. A lot of this stuff's been anaerobic or non-oxygen fermentation. Been kind of caged up for 4 or 5 years in some cases. And these flavonoids, these things bond with a alcohol molecule. So what we do when we swirl is not trying to be fancy or we aerate, you let a wine breathe, is they'll bond with the oxygen molecule where you can really taste it. So we teach people not these special techniques that are only known to Mr. Ward, but we teach people how to really enjoy their wine here, there, everywhere. And what the different grape varieties, what really they mean. Like Chardonnay. Chardonnay is a place in France. In the 1330s, the Sistine monks propagated Chardonnay. So we teach people about the history of wine, instead of just throwing back, it's got this percentage alcohol and this much residual sugar. When I went to France, a gentleman told me, he said, you folks in America, he said, you spend too much time on the sugars and the alcohol content. He said, those are just byproducts. He said, you should focus on the flavors and the aromas that wine produces. So that's it. And as best I can put it, is we want people to understand the wines. We want people to enjoy the wines. We want to work hard to produce the highest quality wine we possibly can on the East Coast. And it's got its own unique characteristics because of the elevations and the temperatures and the soils.
Yeah, and like I said, you've really done your homework, and we were just talking about it briefly about a lot of these vineyards popping up all over the place. And I even think about even the area where I grew up in Iowa. See, like every time I would come home, there'd be another vineyard pop up, and it's like I don't even realize that you could even grow grapes here. And I really find it odd, and I don't think anybody has done probably quite the homework that you've done and most of these people, but I would see these vineyards pop up. I would see local wine and gas stations and just the weirdest places. Yeah. And like just that explosion just makes me wonder, is there been a bubble already in the wine market? Has that burst, or is that still continuing to grow?
I think it's like anything else. If you produce quality, people sense and seek that out, because there are people that'll buy hybrids, they'll buy fruit from somewhere, they'll buy juice that's concentrated. When we pick our grapes, the first thing we do to differentiate ourselves, the first thing we do is we take them in this building and we chill them down to about 55 degrees, because as soon as you pick, that grape starts fermenting. You know, the sugar's in there and the yeast that's on the outside of the skin, you have natural yeast. So we do all these little things we possibly can and employ, like we talked about, the chef, the winemaker, to produce something that's drinkable. I mean, just be like restaurants. You know, there's tons of restaurants, they come and they go. Hybrids have their place and they grow. A hybrid would be something that would maybe have a shorter growth cycle, or could stand the heat or stand the rains or the lack of rains. You know, the hybrids have their place, but the French vinifera really has the history and it has the flavors. I mean, there's no shortcuts to good food or good wine. There's just not. It's a lot of hard work, and we don't back off of that. We're not bragging, but we love to get out here in the soil. You know, the pruning techniques, the vine and the trellis techniques, all these things allow us to ripen our fruit, to hold that on the vine till we get enough sugar in there to where we don't have to add all this stuff, and we keep the acids, because you can tell even today how we cool down from, you know, the 80s, maybe 90s. We very seldom get up above 88 to 90, but at nights we'll get down to 50s, and as we get a little bit further in August, we'll be getting down into the 40s.
Yeah, you'll see a little bit more wintry. I mean, it's North Carolina, it's the south, but since it's the mountains, it's going to be a little bit cooler than anywhere else.
That elevation during the daytime, you know, it's thinner. You don't have as much atmosphere for the sunlight to filter through at 3,500 feet than you do at sea level or at 1,000 feet. But so this is just a very unique area. Going back to your original question, what really drives me is this is a unique area and a beautiful area with a lot of diversity, a lot of opportunity. I just want to see other people get that passion and to do things right. We want to see other wineries come here and succeed. The same thing with the cider. We do cider that's in the Normandy style. A lot of ciders that are produced today are for really a substitute for flat beer sales. So we do cider in the traditional way. We do the brandy in traditional way. We're going to do a Calvados, which is a region in France, but Calvados is a little higher alcohol content, but it's a brandy basically from apples, where it's double fermented. We do Perry. We're fortunate enough to have some old pear trees, and cider can be made from two. And cider is considered a wine. That's why I'm giving you this side. Cider can be made from apples or pears. Nothing else qualifies as a cider. And Perry is such a refreshing drink, and for the restaurants and people to have something that's really clear and crisp. And before you go, if you have time, I'd like to let you just sample some of the ciders that we make, as well as some of the wines.
Oh, you won't have to twist my arm too hard.
Well, and we'll give you something to take back with you. But we love, you know, we're the largest apple producer in the state right here in Henderson County, and we're 7th in the nation. Our state is the 7th largest apple producer in the nation.
Really, I wouldn't have guessed that at all.
Yeah, apples. I'm a master pomologist. Take those classes, try and learn as much as I can. And names and titles don't make anything. It's just we want to learn as much as we can about farming. And we want people to get excited about this area, this region, to come out and see what goes on, to walk down through the vineyard and to taste some of the grapes, because it's totally different. They'll say, why are these grapes so small? I said, well, you know, you go in the grocery store, these aren't grocery store grapes, these are wine grapes. I said, taste one and see how much sugar's in there. And it just kind of blows people's minds that the flavors, the intensity, the only thing people don't get used to are the seeds and the skins. You have to chew the seeds and the skins to tell the grapes are ripe. So, you know, if you get a grape, and we're doing this test, and we can do all the quantitative analysis on pH and brick or sugar content, but if the skins aren't ripe or the seeds are green, we just don't, you know, that's going to show up in your wines. You have to chew those seeds up. They have that nice nutty taste and they're brown. So there's a lot of qualitative aspects that go into before we pick the fruit to give to the winemaker, instead of just buying something where they picked it when the rains came through, or they irrigated it to get it heavy enough. I mean, our Petit Verdot, we just made a Petit Verdot, which I'll let you try. It's really one of the best wines we feel we've made, or our winemakers made here. We also have a Bordeaux blend. We can't call it that. There's a society called the Meritage Society that Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Malbec in some cases. Those are your Bordeaux reds. We called it Jasper. We try and use names of the family here. I had a sister that passed away in nursing school back in 1970, hardest working member of our family. We have a wine named Betty Jean. She passed away back in 1970, but just not in memory, but in honor of these people that really were hard workers and people that we're really proud of. So we take pride even in the names of our wines. Chestnut Gap, Queen is a Cabernet Franc blend that's named after my daughter. We tell people she didn't go from princess, she started out as queen. She started at the top. But Lower Vineyard, Centennial Farm, because we've been in a farm for over 100 years. So we do take pride in what we do. Not haughty pride like, oh, look at us. But we want,
but a lot of heart, a lot of sincerity, genuine.
We want people to enjoy what we produce and not make excuses for it. And we tell people that we go from the vine to the cork. We have our own bottling line. Having a truck come and bottle is another thing that we don't do. Not that that's a sin.
No.
But it's like giving birth. My daughter-in-law is pregnant, and when it's time to give birth, when it's time to bottle, you can't call and set a date for the truck to come and deliver the baby. We bottle some wines, maybe bottled several months before we even get the label approved from the TTB. So it just goes, all these little things that make such a big difference when they're added up to improve the quality of that wine. I hope you see that when you do a little tasting.
Just every step is you've got treating it with kid gloves and stuff like that. And
take cork, for instance. The inside of that bottle is wavy. It's not like an engine cylinder where it's smooth. And people say, oh, there's no more cork left. Well, that's not true. We get the highest quality cork from Scott Lab is the name of the company, kind of a scientific group, but they get cork. It's bark. And we buy the highest quality cork we can because the wine needs to breathe a little bit even when it's in the bottle. We lay that wine down, or we keep it in the box upside down to keep that cork wet. But there's still a little bit of breathing and aging that goes on in that bottle. If you use a rubber cork, it fits in there, but unless you've got a perfectly honed bottle, which there's no such thing unless you're in a chemistry lab, air can get in and things can get out that shouldn't. So, and if you have a cap, you don't get any breathing. Now, caps are fine for things that you don't want to change or age, like Sauvignon Blanc or a cider. We'll cap that. Cider's under a lot of pressure. We choose to use a cap instead of a champagne cork because we just think that's a little more efficient here. So we look at even the types of caps we use to see what they'll impart to the wine. Is there rubber, or is there plastic or something that will give a taste? So there's different grades of caps, believe it or not. We'll see wine that if you're at a restaurant and they ask you to look at the cork or smell the cork, they really want you to look at it to see if it's leached out. Smelling the cork is like, a dirty piece of wood. Get that out of my face. It's to see if it's leached out. We encourage people to taste their wines when they go to a restaurant. That's part of what we do here. Is educate folks. You go to a restaurant and you get a glass of wine. Well, that bottle may have been open for 2 or 3 days. You just ask your waiter. We tell them to do things like that. If it doesn't taste like you think, they want a tip. They're wanting you to be happy. Don't be afraid to speak up. So we just love wine, and we love trying to produce high quality wines. And I guess we're stealthily competitive, but in a good way. We all, the one thing that's different in the wine industry, we always promote each other. We'll say that XYZ, like Burnt Shirt's a vineyard close by, has been good friends for years and years. We'll encourage people to go down and try their Gewürztraminer or Gruner Veltliner, one of the wines that they're specialty, and they send people to us. So it works well. We'll work together on signage and promoting this region. So it's a neat area where you have competition, but it's a different type of competition. It's not cutthroat. Just like if we were good friends and playing basketball, or that we did this, what did you do? Or
It's like restaurants. I'm saying, in a sense, like local restaurants. Why compete with anybody else when you all could work together? And you got the big corporations kind of muscling people around anyways. You don't want the Applebee's to move down the street or take a certain market area. Local people have to stick together in a sense, and they've probably got their own things that they do well and you do well, and there's a different uniqueness to all of you.
I'll tell you one last thing that we do bring to the area is there's a thing where it's really a turnover ratio of cash. It's a multiplier effect. Like if you're a chain store, you might have a multiplier effect of 2.5 or 3, meaning when that money comes into the community. When you have things that are community-based, where all the labor, the only thing that we don't get locally will be a lot of the equipment that comes from Italy or from France, just because that's where
very
it's made.
Specific to what you need.
Germany, some of the stainless steel. But our turnover effect here, our multiplier effect, is probably in the 5 to 6 range for every dollar that we bring in here. It goes back into the community. People come here to stay, spend the night. You come to our parking lot, you'll see cars from all over the place. We spent the money to put the interstate signs up, one of the best investments we made. But we get people in here and they love this area. This is an area that people travel through. But they don't consider it a wine area till we do that education component. And we get that designation, which we should have, and we're working on hard to complete, the Continental Divide. We're on the Eastern Continental Divide right here. So you've got effects on both sides of the Continental Divide. And again, like I said, the Appalachian Mountains, second oldest mountain range in the world. So we've got all these unique things. But when people come here, they'll come here and spend the night. They'll eat at a restaurant. They'll shop at the stores. So we bring agritourism, brings a lot to the community, and it sustains the beauty of this community, where people's land values hopefully will be sustained because we're not just packed right on top of each other. We kind of consider ourselves the DMZ between town and farming. So everything that I have will be in a farm conservation easement. And my children will have to choose to farm it, or it'll go into a land bank to where somebody else will. So we feel that so strong there. I feel so strong that they may not, but I feel strongly that instead of buying a beach house or retiring, that I've wanted to build something that our family could be proud of and work in for generations. Not just one, not just two, but hopefully like the Europeans, where it's multi-generational and people have pride in what they're doing.
Well, anyways, before we get rained on here in a little bit, please let everybody know where they can get up and come to this wonderful facility where I imagine people can come by and taste your wine and purchase the wine. Just talk about this place and where people can find out about you, other than just coming to this wonderful location.
We're at Saint Paul Mountain Vineyards. We're in a few little wine shops. We're not in the grocery store. Don't plan on being in the grocery store, but if you go to Facebook, and if you Google Saint Paul Mountain Vineyards in Hendersonville, North Carolina, we've got interstate signs on I-26 that lead you right here. If you go to our website, but we're at 588 Chestnut Gap Road in Hendersonville, North Carolina, not Henderson, but Hendersonville. We're in the mountains. We're probably about maybe 45 minutes, 50 minutes from Greenville, about 2 hours from Charlotte, maybe 2 hours from the Low Country, Columbia. We're in a good region. We're right next to Asheville, which is the microbrewery capital of the U.S. So we kind of complement each other. We're not substitutes. We complement each other.
Yeah, you're right between 40 and you're right real close to 85. So just a little short little.
Yeah, it is. And it's a good day trip. You can come here, visit with us, visit with Burnshirt, come and see Hendersonville, which is a beautiful area. The Main Street's really, really nice. We're going to have a small shop there on Main Street. It'll be East Coast Wines, where we're really trying to promote East Coast wines. And we'll have wines from Vermont, from other parts of Finger Lakes, just letting people know what we can do here on the East Coast, as well as inviting people to come out and see what we do here in Henderson County.
Well, Alan, I can't thank you enough for sitting down and talking to me today. Is there anything that I've glazed over, anything you want to get out to everybody who's listening right now?
No. What we're going to do is we can't film this most likely because you'll be in here tasting. We're going to take you inside and let you see for yourself. And we really do appreciate you coming out.
I appreciate you.
And visiting with us and letting us get our message out. So,
Well, it's a wonderful message. A wonderful message of putting a lot of heart in what you do, and I really appreciate you doing it. So
well, I'll tell you, the honor's all ours because we appreciate people coming here. If it wasn't for people enjoying, we're not out here to promote ourselves. If people didn't enjoy what we do, we're done. So we enjoy the hard work in that challenge, and we hope to meet that challenge today, tomorrow, and for years to come. So again, thank you so much.
thank you, Alan.